Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, October 4th, 2024. Labor Department out with the September jobs report. 254,000 jobs added, more than expected. Unemployment rate falls from 4.2% to 4.1%. The dock workers at ports on the East and Gulf Coast returned to work after Thursday night's agreement between the Longshoremen's Union and shippers and port owners to end the three-day strike. President Joe Biden makes a surprise appearance in the White House briefing room to talk about the economic news. In the presidential race this year, Republican nominee Donald Trump goes to Georgia to discuss Hurricane Helene recovery, appearing for the first time with Republican Governor Brian Kemp, while Democratic nominee Vice President Kamala Harris is in Michigan. Which party controls the U.S. Senate after next month's election may come down to a few close races. We will talk with Houston Chronicle politics reporter Jeremy Wallace about Texas, where Republican incumbent Ted Cruz is facing Democratic Congressman Colin Allred. And we'll hear part of the debate in Pennsylvania, where Democratic Senator Bob Casey, the incumbent, faces a challenge from businessman David McCormick. Plus, the latest on the Middle East. Iran's supreme leader sends a warning to Israel. The resistance in the region will not back down, and we will win. Story from Associated Press. America's employers added a surprisingly strong 254,000 jobs in September. The latest evidence that the U.S. labor market is still solid enough to support steady hiring and a growing economy. Last month's hiring gain was far more than economists had expected, and it was up sharply from the 159,000 jobs that were added in August. And after rising for most of 2024, the unemployment rate dropped for a second straight month, from 4.2% in August to 4.1% in September, the Labor Department said Friday. That was from AP. President Joe Biden spoke about this and other economic news in the White House briefing room.
The past 2 days we've gotten some very good news about the American economy. Just yesterday, shipping carriers, after some discussion, an International Longshoremen's Union came to an agreement to keep ports in the East Coast and the Gulf ports open. We averted what could have become a major crisis for the country, and a tentative agreement which includes record wage increases for dock workers and shows the importance of collective bargaining and represents, I think, critical progress toward a strong contract. I especially want to thank the carriers, the port operators, and the Longshoremen's Union for reaching this agreement at a time when the nation has experienced such terrible devastation from Hurricane Helene. It was truly a service to the American people for all these parties to come together to respond to our request to keep the ports open. I was determined to avert a crisis at this moment because it's a critical moment. If we didn't do this now, we'd have a real problem. I also want to thank my White House team for the work. They worked around the clock to bring the parties together. But today, we got more incredible news. Although the strength of the American economy it's about the strength of the American economy. New jobs report, as you all know, you've been reporting, created 250,000 jobs in September. The expectation was for 150,000 jobs in September, which has far exceeded that number. Not only the previous 2 months was the previous 2 months was revised up 75,000 jobs. And from the very beginning, we were told time and again that the policies we were pursuing, we'd put forward weren't going to work, make things worse, including some of the other team are still saying they're going to make things worse. But we've proven them wrong. You know, we've told our we were told our American Rescue Plan was too big and it would crowd out private investment. We proved them wrong. We vaccinated the nation and got immediate economic relief to people in need. When I came to office determined to end trickle-down economics and grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. I know you're tired of hearing me say that over and over again, but that was the policy, that it remains the policy. Because when you do that, everyone does well. When the middle class grows, the nation's stronger. And the nation's stronger when there's a strong union movement as well.
President Joe Biden in the White House briefing room. Senator Marco Rubio, Republican of Florida, posting on X another fake jobs report out from Biden-Harris government today. 16 of the last 17 reports have been significantly revised downwards after media helps them with their fake headlines. But all the fake numbers in the world aren't going to fool people dealing with the Biden-Harris economic disaster every day. That post from Senator Marco Rubio. Wall Street reaction to the jobs report: the Dow up 341, NASDAQ up 219, S&P up 51. Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, Republican vice presidential nominee, talked about jobs and the economy during a campaign rally today in Lindale, Georgia.
One of the things that we have got to do better is that we have got to stop the crazy policies in this country that cause mills like the one that we're standing at right now to get shut down, to get closed down, and to get shipped overseas. I read a little bit about this mill, and Marjorie told me a little bit about it when I arrived. This was once, for over 100 years, a place where we made great American products with proud American craftsmanship. We made blue jeans in this factory. We made things that the United States needed, and we did it with American workers. And now this mill, and I'm so proud of the Silva family for buying it, rehabilitating it, and turning it into an event center. That's a great thing. But it should still be making great American products, and it's not because of a failure of American leadership. I mean, think of this. You can almost imagine proud American workers coming here, going to work, building a life, going back home and raising a family. And now, as I understand it, they film sometimes literal horror shows because what happened to American manufacturing was an actual horror. What we did to this nation, what we did to this proud American tradition of craftsmanship was a disgrace. And if the presidency of Donald J. Trump represents anything, my friends, and if the future presidency of Donald J. Trump represents anything, it is that we are getting back to stamping more products made in the USA. We're going to make our own stuff, and we're going to do it with American working people.
Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, the Republican vice presidential nominee, running with the presidential nominee, former President Donald Trump. Senator Vance campaigning today in Lindale, Georgia. Story from the New Jersey Monitor. Tens of thousands of striking dock workers returned to work after they reached a tentative labor agreement Thursday, ending a stoppage that threatened to cripple commerce nationwide into the holidays. The International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance Limited announced that they reached a tentative agreement on wages and agreed to extend their contract until January 15th. The union and the alliance, which represents shipping companies and port authorities, plan to return to the bargaining table to negotiate all other outstanding issues. Dock workers at ports from Texas to Maine walked off the job Tuesday in the first large-scale Eastern dock worker strike since 1977, when dock workers stayed off the job for several weeks. That reporting from the New Jersey Monitor. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, spoke about the end of this strike and unions in general as she stopped by the Redford Township Fire Station in Detroit, Michigan.
Just yesterday, we saw another example of the power of collective bargaining, right? When the longshoremen and the U.S. Maritime Alliance came together, ended a strike, and reached an agreement on a record wage, right? They did good. They did good. And I say everywhere I go, look, collective bargaining benefits everybody. And you know, the term, and I'm looking at our young leaders who are here. I'm so glad you guys are here. So collective bargaining, it's just a basic logical point. So here's what it means. It means that in any negotiation, you want the outcome to be fair, right? We all want fairness, right? Everybody wants fairness, or should. So here's the thing about collective bargaining. If you want the outcome to be fair, you gotta realize if you're requiring the one worker to negotiate against the big entity, do we really think that the outcome is going to be fair? Probably not. But if you let the workers together as the collective, then negotiate against the big entity, it's more likely that the outcome will be fair. That's the basic point of collective bargaining. That's the basic point of why we want our unions to be able to do their work on behalf of workers every day. Because we know when union wages go up, everyone's wages go up. Yeah. And when union workplaces are safer, all workplaces are safer. And the bottom line is when unions are strong, America is strong.
Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee in Redford Township on the western edge of Detroit at a fire station. The International Longshoremen's Association, the dockworkers union, went on strike at the start of the week demanding higher wages and a ban on all automation at ports. The reports are that the agreement they've reached is for a 62% pay increase, $24 an hour for the top pay rate over 6 years. Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su today was on CNBC talking about automation at ports.
Madam Secretary, Jim Cramer, the difficult and dangerous jobs issue is why Rotterdam, which is one of the top 10 ports in the world, went entirely unmanned. When I was out at video this year, they showed me machines that would be unmanned that could handle any sort of what would have been otherwise a tragedy with humans. Where are we in terms of getting to where Rotterdam would be without laying off people, without hurting people who are currently working?
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the broader conversation around, what is the impact of automation? What do we want to see, right? Especially been highlighted because of, advancements in artificial intelligence. I think that is the right question, which is how do we make sure that as we look at technology and those kinds of improvements, how do we make sure that working people share, right? It's the same issue around the wages. As things improve, we want to make sure that workers' lives also improve. And I think there are ways to do that. Automation is going to be something that the parties continue to talk about. And again, this is why workers having a say is so important, when, how, whether technology is going to be implemented and what the impact is going to be on real families. One of the signs that the longshoremen had on the picket line was machines don't have families. We care, and this president and this vice president care deeply, and the economic effects our record is clear on this, that when the economy does well, we care what happens to working families. And this is yet another example of how, profits and prosperity can be shared.
The acting Labor Secretary Julie Su interviewed on CNBC this morning. This is Washington Today. Associated Press reporting from Evans, Georgia. After making up privately, Donald Trump and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp used the aftermath of Hurricane Helene to put their détente on public display, with the former president praising a fellow Republican he blistered just months ago and promising to treat the state well if he returns to the White House. Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, and Kemp, a popular second-term governor, appeared outside Augusta to tout recovery efforts after Helene made landfall in Florida and wrought widespread damage as it moved inland through Georgia and other states. That was from Associated Press. Here is that event, beginning with Governor Kemp.
And we'll continue to urge FEMA to add more impacted counties to the federal declaration list. We started with just 11, and after a call to both the White House and FEMA, they upped that number considerably, up to 44 or 45 counties as we speak. We're also being mindful of our neighbors who have come to our aid in times past. Yesterday, I authorized the Georgia Guard to send a Chinook helicopter and crew to North Carolina to help in ongoing search and rescue operations. What they're going through, what we're all going through, is a living nightmare, and we're going to continue to pull together as we go through this together. These are just a few of the actions that we've taken, but rest assured, we will not stop until everyone is recovered and made whole. Someone sent me a Bible verse earlier today, and I've been thinking a lot about this. It's Galatians 6:9, and it reads, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." Those words epitomize where we are today and our commitment. We are not giving up. We are not going to leave until the job is done. I want to encourage all of our local officials and so many of their citizens that are working so hard on this recovery and helping and talking to people every day. Keep up that great work. Keep the faith and know that we will be with you till the end. It is my honor, and I want to thank President Trump for coming back to our state again for the second time to view storm damage and keep a national focus on our state as we recover. I hope you'll welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. Mr. President.
Governor Brian Kemp, Republican of Georgia, introducing Donald Trump in Evans, Georgia, after Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, made some remarks. He took reporters' questions about FEMA aid after Hurricane Helene and also about the economy and the jobs report.
It's great. No. It's great. No, we work together. We've always worked together very well. Really well. It's top. Yes? Yeah, of course they are. It's been a terrible response from the White House. They're missing $1 billion that was used for another purpose, and nobody's seen anything like that. No, from that standpoint, it's been terrible. Say it? I'm not thinking about voters right now. I'm thinking about lives. And to be honest, it's much bigger than anything else. But we're thinking about lives, a lot of lives lost, a lot of people missing. And that's what I'd be focused on right now. No, it's not. It's inflation has devastated our economy. It's one of the big problems we have. And on jobs, we have the illegals have taken more jobs than anybody else. You have illegals coming in and they're taking the jobs. And when you look at the numbers from that standpoint, it's a shame. We have to get the jobs to the people that have lived here for a long time and they're great citizens of our country. But when you look at the job numbers, they just came out, and then you look at who's getting the jobs, and it's been very unfortunate from that standpoint. You have illegal, you have the migrants, you're reading about it. Now, a lot of the money that was supposed to go to Georgia and supposed to go to North Carolina and all of the others is going and has gone already. It's been gone for people that came into the country illegally, and nobody's ever seen anything like that. That's a shame.
Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential nominee this year, in Evans, Georgia, a joint appearance with Governor Brian Kemp, Republican of Georgia, talking about hurricane relief and answering some reporters' questions. On that last point that Donald Trump made, NBC News writes that White House spokesman Andrew Bates pushed back on what he called lies shared by some Republican figures regarding the Hurricane Helene response. In a new memo shared today, Bates said some Republican leaders and their partners in right-wing media are using Hurricane Helene to lie and divide us. Their latest missive baselessly claiming that FEMA is out of money to respond to Hurricane Helene because of an existing program that supports cities and towns that are sheltering migrants. This is false, Bates wrote. No disaster relief funding at all was used to support migrants, housing, and services. None at all, he continued. That was the story from NBC News. This also came up today at the White House briefing with Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
Former President Trump is accusing the Biden administration of using FEMA funding to support undocumented migrants. How is the White House responding to that?
I mean, it's just categorically false. It is not true. It is a false statement. And look, the fact of the matter is, I think Washington Post fact checker did a piece, and the headline recently, just moments ago, not too long ago, and the headline was, "No, Biden did not take FEMA relief money to use on migrants, but Trump did." I'll leave it there.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre with reporters in the White House briefing room. Donald Trump will be holding a rally on Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania, the site of the first assassination attempt against him back in June. Be joined by Vice Presidential running mate Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio and Elon Musk, the owner of X, SpaceX, and Tesla, and someone who Donald Trump has said might help him streamline government in a second Trump presidential term. Elon Musk posting today on X, "I will be there to support." The rally in Butler, Pennsylvania is 5 p.m. Eastern Saturday, and it will be live on C-SPAN television. You can also listen and watch anywhere on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. From CBS News, former President Barack Obama will soon begin campaigning for Vice President Kamala Harris. He is set to embark on a blitz across the battleground states with several events in the last month before Election Day. The former president will kick off his campaign efforts next Thursday, October 10th, in the Pittsburgh area. It's unclear if Harris will appear with him. And the Hoya newspaper from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. says Nikki Haley recounted her presidential campaign experiences and urged politicians to actively listen to voters and work to gain their trust during an October 3rd event at Georgetown. Haley, who served as governor of South Carolina from 2011 to 17 and United States ambassador to the United Nations from 2017 to 18, ran for president in the 2024 Republican primaries, arguing that she would appeal to moderates better than former President Donald Trump. During the event, hosted by Georgetown Institute for Politics and Public Service, entitled Reflections on Running, Haley discussed the election and partisan polarization. That was the reporting from the Hoya. C-SPAN cameras were there Thursday night. One student asked Nikki Haley about her endorsement now of Donald Trump.
Hi, Ambassador. My name is Jason Goodman. I'm a Master of Public Policy and MBA student from Los Angeles. I respect that you preferred President Trump's policies, but after January 6th, you said of President Trump, he went down a path he shouldn't have, and we shouldn't have followed him, and we can't let that ever happen again. Since then, he has both continued to deny he lost the 2020 election and refused to accept the 2024 outcome if he loses. So my question is, why is the path that President Trump is currently going down any different than the path he took in 2020?
First of all, I stand by everything I've said. I don't take anything back. When I tell you something, I mean it. I say it. It's what happened. I think he's wrong to say that that the election was stolen. You had multiple courts look at it. No one found proof of it. I have always said that. I think he lost the election. And I think going into this next election, if anything, we want Americans to feel like they know what they're going to get. My biggest concern is that we won't have the results on Election Day. And I want every single state, I don't care whether you're red or you're blue, you owe it to the American people to give them the results on Election Day. That's part of what America needs. And a lot of states made some corrections on what they need to do that. But we've got to get that, because that's about trust in an election, is being able to do that. But look, I think it's not helpful for him to talk about whether he thinks the election was stolen. The country has moved on for that. And I think it's important for him to say, get out and vote. We need you to get out and vote. Everybody's vote is their voice. It should be more positive. Thank you.
Nikki Haley, former Republican presidential candidate, former South Carolina governor, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Thursday night at Georgetown University. You can find the full event with her at our video library, cspan.org. Washington Today continues in a moment with a look at the U.S. Senate races in Texas, which has a Republican incumbent, and Pennsylvania, where a Democrat is running for re-election.
C-SPAN Now is a free mobile app featuring your unfiltered view of what's happening in Washington, live and on demand. Keep up with the day's biggest events with live streams of floor proceedings and hearings from the U.S. Congress, White House events, the courts, campaigns, and more from the world of politics, all at your fingertips. You can also stay current with the latest episodes of Washington Journal and find scheduling information for C-SPAN's TV networks and C-SPAN Radio, plus a variety of compelling podcasts. C-SPAN Now is available at the Apple Store and Google Play. Scan the QR code to download it for free today, or visit our website, cspan.org/C-SPAN Now. C-SPAN Now, your front row seat to Washington, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Washington Times, Congressman Colin Allred has gained ground in the Texas Senate race in the waning weeks of the election, giving Democrats a glimmer of hope in the Republican stronghold. Senator Ted Cruz is still favored to win, while Democrats have an uphill battle in Texas. Recent polling, Mr. Allred's fundraising prowess, and election watchers forecasting a closer-than-expected race have the Republican incumbent aggressively campaigning to keep his seat. If Mr. Allred were to win, he'd be the first Democrat elected to statewide office in Texas in nearly 3 decades. Democrats are trying to cling to power in the upper chamber, and with the Montana Senate race leaning toward the GOP, they see Texas as a viable backup plan. That was the article from the Washington Times. Coming up in a minute, we'll talk about this race with a Houston Chronicle politics reporter. First, a few of the TV ads now running in Texas.
Keep your eye on the ball. Ready? Okay, that's okay. Concentrate.
Texas girls are tough.
You got this. Let's do it again.
But they're facing a new opponent they can't beat by digging deeper. Colin Allred could have stopped men from competing in women's sports, but instead, he voted against our daughters. What kind of man does that?
Truth and Courage PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
When it comes to the border, Ted Cruz is all hat, no cattle.
Colin Allred is tough.
He's standing up to extremists in both parties.
Both parties.
When there was actually a good plan,
Backed by sheriffs and border officers,
Republicans and Democrats, Ted Cruz said, we don't need a border bill.
12 years in the Senate, and he still has no clue.
I'm Colin Allred, and I approve this message because we don't need talk on the border. We need action.
Joining us now to talk about the Texas U.S. Senate race between incumbent Republican Ted Cruz and Democratic challenger Colin Allred is Jeremy Wallace, Houston Chronicle politics reporter. Thanks for being with us. It has been 30 years since a Democrat won a statewide race in Texas. Could this race break that streak?
Look, it's an entirely different rodeo in Texas this time around. And the reason this is so much more competitive is that the Texas voter registration rolls have grown at such crazy numbers with new people coming into the state, more younger, diverse populations, in our cities. It's really changed the politics here. We've added, just since Ted Cruz's last reelection when he won by 215,000 votes, we've added 2.6 million voters. That is essentially adding Connecticut to the state of Texas. It's really kind of put a wild card out there where I'm not here to say that Ted Cruz is going to win or lose, but what I tell you is it's a lot more competitive, and there's a wild card where nobody quite knows where this thing is going to end up.
What have been the top issues so far in the campaign?
Well, one of the biggest issues in this is actually Ted Cruz himself, right? Ted Cruz, the one thing that makes him different from a lot of other Senate candidates, that he has high negative ratings, particularly with independents in the state. He has higher negative ratings with independents than he did 6 years ago, the last time he was running. A lot of that probably hinges on his time when he ended up going to Cancun during the winter storms in Texas, when, we had hundreds of Texans die, millions of people were left without power, and people will probably remember the airport walk where Ted Cruz is avoiding the media. That has really had an impact, I think, on independent voters particularly. The scars of that haven't quite healed in Texas, and every time they see those ads that Colin Allred's running, it's reminding people of that. On the flip side of this, you can imagine Ted Cruz is like, Colin Allred's an interesting character because he hasn't been in the Congress for terribly long, so that he doesn't have a lot to kind of work with there. But what he's aiming at is trying to paint Allred as your typical liberal who wants to, have transgender, students playing in, sports. He's weak on the border. Those types of more generic shots that aren't nearly as specific to Allred, but more of a broader strike at Allred. And those are effective in some ways, particularly in our suburban communities, that are giving people a moment to think, okay, wait, can I trust Colin Allred, or is he going to be like, the far left wing of the Democratic Party if he gets there?
There is a debate coming up between Ted Cruz and Colin Allred. Why so late in the cycle, and could this make a difference?
Yeah, it is really late in this cycle. It'll be a week before early voting in person begins, but absentee balloting has already started in Texas. It is well underway. And so it comes when a lot of votes will already have been cast, so it is later than we would normally suspect. The thing to kind of, the one thing we know about Ted Cruz is he is really good at debating. And I would go so far as to say when I covered him in 2018 in his reelection campaign, I dare say those debates really helped him in his campaign when he, again, won the state by just 215,000 votes, which is pretty small for Texas. And so those debates are really good for him because he's a former debate champion back when he was at Princeton University. And so like a national debate champion. And so he's really good in that format. He's a lawyer, he's argued in the Supreme Court. He's really well positioned for something like this. Beto O'Rourke was not. In that 2018 campaign, you could kind of see that happen, in real time. Colin Allred's different. He does have, he is an attorney, not nearly as seasoned as, Ted Cruz was, when, on the debate stage, but he at least kind of gives a potential of being a little bit more prepared than maybe Beto O'Rourke was, who was unfamiliar with that kind of an environment.
We're talking with Jeremy Wallace, Houston Chronicle politics reporter. Let's talk money. How much does each candidate have? And are the national Republican and Democratic parties and outside groups putting any money in?
The short answer is Allred is outraising, Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is kind of starting to get a little desperate for money. This week, he was all over the national conservative programs, almost begging people to send money to Texas to help, trying to let people know that there really is a fight here and he's in some trouble and he needs help. So you can see that the numbers are going the other way. And national Democrats particularly have started to, put some money into this race. It's not a lot, but enough in the Houston market to kind of give a sense that, okay, they see that they might have some better potential in Texas than maybe even some of those other states that we thought were going to be more competitive. Think Montana. There are some Democrats nationally who are saying, hey, look, instead of focusing so much on Montana, where Tester has an uphill battle, let's shift some of those resources to Colin Allred, who looks like he's neck and neck with Cruz, if you listen to Ted Cruz.
And finally, Texas is a very big state. What is a campaign like in Texas? Let's say retail politics versus something broader.
Yeah, retail politics, I would say, is almost impossible in Texas. In a state this big, it is a lot of travel. As a political reporter, I'm going through tires on my car as fast as you can go through them because you can't get from one place to the next. The candidates are all coming here, the presidential candidates to raise money. And so we have to get to those events. So we're always traveling the state. But the size of the state makes it where you almost need to fly everywhere, which is obviously a different kind of a cost. And the advertising dollars alone in Houston will drain a campaign quickly. It reminds me a lot of, I used to be a reporter in Florida, and it reminds me when Florida was in its heyday as a battleground state where you could lose millions of dollars in one day just to try to blanket all those markets and to crisscross the state. Texas is doubly so, just because of the size, where you need to turn out the vote is so hard to do. And, that's why you see Colin Allred, he hasn't gone to the let's go everywhere type strategy like Beto O'Rourke used back in 2018 when he was going to small rural counties. The cost benefit ratio of that to drive for, 6 hours to speak to 100 people just isn't there, So Colin Allred has put much more resources onto television than Beto O'Rourke was doing at this point. And he's focusing more on those big cities, still trying to do some outreach in those, rural areas. But you can tell their strategy is, get those voters out in Dallas, in San Antonio, Houston, and Austin, and, make a real push in those places.
Jeremy Wallace, Houston Chronicle politics reporter. You can find his articles at HoustonChronicle.com. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Another close U.S. Senate race is Pennsylvania, according to the polls. NBC News writes that Democratic Senator Bob Casey went head-to-head with Republican challenger Dave McCormick in a bitter first debate Thursday night that reflected the close nature and high stakes of a race that could determine the balance of power in Washington. The hour-long showdown touched on topics from the economy to abortion to energy, and it frequently got personal, as each candidate repeatedly tried to paint the other as a liar. Casey targeted questions about McCormick's residency and his work as a hedge fund manager, while McCormick attacked Casey, a three-term incumbent, as a career politician who's a rubber stamp for Democratic leaders. That was from NBC News. Here is some of Thursday night's debate, beginning with Senator Casey talking about Dave McCormick, saying he's not in favor of eliminating the Senate legislative filibuster, and then they went into the issues mentioned in that article.
He's not going to support it because he doesn't want us to make progress on those issues. He doesn't support the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis legislation. He doesn't support the Women's Health Protection Act. He doesn't support legislation to protect unions. And he also doesn't want us to talk about his own record as a hedge fund CEO where he made a lot of money investing in China and hurt Pennsylvania doing it.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
Well, listen, I mean, we've talked about my business career. Bob Casey's not only anti-business, he's anti-success. I ran one of the great firms in the world. The funny thing about it is it was very successful. It invested about 3% of its investments in China, invested around the world. It was working for teachers, firemen, and policemen. But here's the best part of this whole thing. This is the career politician, Bob Casey. When he was the treasurer, he sat on the board of the teachers' pension plan right here in Pennsylvania, and he approved Bridgewater. He said it was a great firm. He approved all these investing strategies. So now that he's running against me, Bob Casey is using this as a way to come after me. He's anti-business, he's anti-success, and he's a liar.
I want to give you 15 seconds to respond to that.
Yeah, Dennis, let's fill in the blanks about what that hedge fund did in China. Invested in China's military, in companies that made bombers and missiles and aircraft carriers to help China. Invested, as I said, in China's largest producer of fentanyl. Invested in Chinese oil companies and steel companies while he was betting against American steel.
I appreciate it. Look, you're going to have 90-second closing statement. We've got to move to another topic, and it's a big one.
Can I get 15 seconds
Go
on
ahead.
this? Just very quickly. Bob Casey approved a $31 million investment in China Mobile when he was the treasurer. He's taken money, lobbyist money, from a Chinese drone company. This is the kind of career politician lying.
And I don't want this to be a tennis match, but now I got to give you 15 seconds to respond to that.
We're supposed to believe this person who lied to the people of our state about where he lives? How does someone tell a lie to the people of the state he seeks to represent about where he lives?
Senator Bob Casey, Democrat from Pennsylvania, running for a fourth six-year term, debating Republican challenger Dave McCormick on Thursday night. WHYY, writing about the debate, says McCormick is making his second run for the Senate after losing narrowly to Dr. Mehmet Oz in 2022's Republican primary. He is a former hedge fund CEO who served at the highest levels of former President George W. Bush's administration and sat on Donald Trump's Defense Advisory Board. From HuffPost, Donald Trump on Thursday addressed wife Melania Trump's apparent pro-choice stance on abortion by claiming that he'd told her, "I'm not going to tell you what to do." The article continues. The comment drew ire on social media, however, as critics suggested the former president and current GOP nominee is trying to tell other women exactly what to do with their own bodies via his role in overturning Roe v. Wade, which has led to the banning of or restriction to abortion in multiple states. That was the article from HuffPost. Abortion was a topic today at the Family Research Council's summit in Washington, D.C., and one of the speakers, Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri.
I have to tell you, at this time, and a time of chaos and confusion, and a time of trial that we are facing, I think it's time that we say clearly with one voice, there is no right more important than the right to life. There is no right more foundational than the right to life. It is time that we made clear that the right to life is not some added extra in our society. It's not a luxury good. The right to life is absolutely foundational to everything we believe in as conservatives. And it is right there in our Declaration of Independence, is it not? The foundational principles of this country built on life, right there in the Declaration, that we are given our rights, inalienable rights, by a creator, not by government, not by some bureaucrat somewhere, by a creator. And what is the first of those rights that God gives us? It is the right to life. It is the right to life in his image. And we know as conservatives that it is this right to life. It is the equal dignity of every single child, whether they are anticipated or not, whether they're planned for or not, no matter what their skin color or eye color or hair color is, no matter where they live, no matter where they're from, every single person is created in the image of God. That is our foundational truth. It is our foundational commitment, and we need to say it again boldly and unashamedly. And we need to say that this country, if we do not have a culture of life in this country, what will it mean for the United States of America? Aaron just said it. A culture that does not love life, a culture that does not protect the innocent unborn, is a culture that becomes harsh. It's a culture that becomes callous. It's a culture that is all too willing to discard those who it deems weak or unworthy or less than. That is not the United States of America. That's not the America I know. That's not the America we're fighting for.
Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, at the Family Research Council Pray, Vote, Stand Summit in Washington, D.C. joining his wife there, Erin Hawley, who is with the Alliance Defending Freedom Center for Life and Regulatory Practice Senior Counsel and Vice President. And that organization was part of the Dobbs Supreme Court case that overturned Roe v. Wade's constitutional right to abortion. This is Washington Today. Iran's supreme leader warned, writes the New York Times, on Friday of further strikes against Israel, using a rare sermon in Tehran to express solidarity with Palestinians and Hezbollah, as Israel kept up punishing attacks against Tehran's proxy forces in the Middle East and took aim at more of its commanders. In the White House briefing room, President Joe Biden answered reporters' questions about the situation.
Could you clarify some of your comments yesterday with regard to strikes on Iranian oil facilities? What did you mean by them, given some of the reactions we're seeing in the market?
Well, look, the Israelis have not concluded what they're going to do in terms of a strike. That's under discussion. I think if I were in their shoes, I'd be thinking about other alternatives than striking oil fields.
Good. Thank you, Karine. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for being here. This week, Senator Chris Murphy said it's certainly a possibility that the Israeli government is not going to sign any diplomatic agreement prior to the election, which is what you have been calling for so long, potentially to try to influence the result. Do you agree? Do you have any worries that Netanyahu may be trying to influence the election and that's why he has not agreed to a diplomatic solution?
No administration has helped Israel more than I have. None. 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 And I think Bibi should remember that. And whether he's trying to influence the election or not, I don't know, but I'm not counting on that.
You've said many times recently that you want to speak to him, that you plan to.
No, I didn't say plan to. I didn't say want to.
You don't want to?
No, I didn't say that. You're making it sound like I'm seeking and speaking. I'm assuming when they make the decision of how they're going to respond, we will then have a discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for being here. What are you advising the Israelis to do in terms of their retaliation to Iran? And at this point, you still haven't spoken to Netanyahu. Is it fair to say that you have little personal influence over what he decides to do?
No. Look, our teams are in contact 12 hours a day. They're constantly in contact. I've already had my presidential daily brief. We've already had interface between our military, the diplomats. It's in constant contact. They are trying to figure out, and it's the high holidays as well. They're not going to make a decision immediately, and so we're going to wait to see when they want to talk.
President Joe Biden taking reporters' questions in the White House briefing room. The Times of Israel writing about the speech by the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei today, saying he defended this week's missile attack on Israel that deepened fears of a regional war, while praising the logical and legal Hamas-led October 7th invasion and massacre in southern Israel that sparked the war in Gaza and fueled violence throughout the Middle East. Speaking in front of tens of thousands at a mosque in the capital Tehran, Khamenei said Iran-backed armed groups in the Middle East will not back down. Even after Israel recently killed a spate of terrorist leaders, he said the resistance in the region will not back down, and these martyrdoms, we will win. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, spoke about the situation in the Middle East and the U.S. role in an interview with Family Research Council President Tony Perkins at today's Research Council Summit in Washington.
Let's talk about Israel, the Middle East. Has Israel decided to move on without U.S. support, given how their hands have been tied at every turn by the Biden administration?
It is a very sad statement of fact that Israel feels as though they cannot trust the United States right now, the leadership in the White House. And of course, Harris and Biden have projected weakness on the world stage. That's what's gotten us into this most dangerous situation that our nation and all of our allied nations have faced since World War II. But they feel like in so many ways that if they share too much information with the White House, that somehow it may be leaked or that Iran may find out about it. I mean, that is a shocking fact. It's of great concern to all of us. We have to return strength to the White House. We believe in the principle of peace through strength. And it is more important right now than it has been in many, many decades. And our allies around the world are nervous because they don't know if Biden will stand unequivocally with our allies. Israel is the case in point right here. They have tried to equivocate, as you know. They have tried to appease Iran. They have empowered Iran. Were it not for Biden and Harris's decision not to enforce the sanctions, Iran would not have $100 billion in their coffers to use to exact this terror on our dear friends Israel. So this is a serious situation. I am so grateful that the election is just about 30 days away now, because we need a dramatic change in focus on the world stage, and Donald Trump will provide that.
Mr. Speaker, I want to press in on one of those topics about leaking of information. There has been some concern this week that someone in the Biden administration compromised IDF troops in their movement into Lebanon by leaking information in advance of that ground incursion.
I've heard the same charge. It is alarming. Of course, we are looking into that. We'll be getting some classified briefings on the subject. But the very idea that that would be discussed would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. But that's what the current team in charge has brought to the White House. I mean, look, we need a leader that our allies respect and trust, and that our enemies fear. We do not have that right now. And I just want to say, since we're talking about the subject, the only person that our enemies fear less than Joe Biden is Kamala Harris. Imagine her serving as the commander-in-chief in these dangerous times. It's an unthinkable proposition, and I hope the American people see through all the rhetoric and look at that very glaring fact.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, taking part remotely in the Family Research Council Summit in Washington, D.C., interviewed by the group's president, Tony Perkins. ABC News has an article. A third U.S. charter flight departed Thursday from Beirut and landed in Frankfurt, Germany, early Friday morning, local time, according to the State Department. A flight departed with 97 American citizens and eligible family members on board, bringing the total number of individuals evacuated through the charters this week to roughly 350, according to the State Department. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, Word for Word, and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. You can sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.